What's up, Inspired Vision students, plus anybody I might be catching on YouTube? We are doing day 6 of 18 of our Accelerated Algebra I course. So, this Accelerated Algebra I course today, we are writing equations in standard slope-intercept form, plotting points to write or graph equations, and something brand new today, we're graphing two variable inequalities. So, as always, it is time to learn some math. Let's get ready for that STAAR test. Here's how today's going to work. We are going to do 7 guided practice questions, 10 independent practice questions, 1 STAAR question. Now we are focused on reporting category 2, TEKS A.3. So before we get started, make sure you subscribe so we can get each one of these lessons to help you prepare for that STAAR test. Alright, here is our first question. We are given 9x minus 4y is equal to negative 9. We are asked to put this in slope-intercept form. So slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b. So y equals mx plus b is what we've already been doing. So all we need to do is solve for y. So if we have 9x minus 4y equals negative 9, and we're asked to solve for y, this is the whole reason why I've taught you why we use our rectangle triangle. So if we solve for y, our rectangle goes right in front of y. So the number that's its coefficient, that would be negative 4. And our triangle in this case would be 9x. And you need to make sure to get the whole term in the triangle. Now our next step is to always move the triangle first. So we're going to know that this 9x is really positive. So to move it over to the other side, we have to do minus 9x to both sides of the equation. This is going to leave us with just minus 4y on the left-hand side of the equation. But the right-hand side of the equation is where a lot of people make mistakes. So sometimes people tell me negative 9 minus 9x is negative 18. But that's not right. Well, if negative 18 is not right, maybe negative 18x. Is that what 9 minus 9x is? No, we know better. We know better because these are not like terms. So we're going to put these side by side. Now this is the most important thing from yesterday's lesson, day 5, and we need to make sure we know this every single time this happens. When we move over x, when we're solving for y, we don't have like terms. Now, this didn't happen on day 3. Day 3, when we moved over our triangle, we went ahead and did that. It's because we were solving for x in day 3, and now we're solving for y, and we have 2 variables to deal with. That's the reason why this happens. Okay, so negative 9 minus 9x and negative 4y on the left-hand side. Next, we need to divide by what's in front of what's in front of y. That's our negative 4. So both of these terms gets divided by negative 4. Now if you type this in your calculator, negative 9 divided by negative 4, you're going to get a crazy decimal. But then if you hit math enter, what happens is my 2 negatives cancel each other out, and you're just left with 9 divided by 4. And then again, positive 9 divided by 4x. Now this answer choice is the same as D. All they did was reorder it, but they kept the same coefficient in front of x with the same sign and the same y-intercept. That's the number without the x. Okay, something else for today. We're going to write this equation in standard form. Now the easiest way to do this is first know what standard form means. Standard form means that both my x and my y's are on the left side of the equation and they're equal to a number. Kind of just like number 1. Before we even solve that for y, both my x and my y's were on the left hand side and they were equal to a number. It's okay if that's a minus and that's a negative. It's just as long as both my x's and y's are on the left hand side. Now there's only one answer choice that even has this, and that is A. Okay, none of these have both x and y on the same side. Now just to double check, we can solve this for y by using our rectangle triangle and make sure that we get this equation. So if I set up my rectangle and triangle, my rectangle would be -7. My triangle would be 3x. To move over the triangle, I need to do -3x on both sides. We know that -6 minus 3x are not like terms, so we're going to put them side by side. And then we're going to divide both of these by -7. If we take -6 divided by -7, we're going to get a positive 6 over 7. And then -3 divided by -7 is also a positive 3 over 7. And we bring down our x, because we never type x in our calculator unless we're in our y equals key. Okay, moving on. Number 3. This looks a lot harder than it is. It's asking us for the x-intercept, the y-intercept, and for us to graph the line. Now, this is a really big clue what we need to do. Also, let me cover what x-intercept means. X-intercept is when y equals 0. Y-intercept is when x equals 0. So in order to graph this equation, we're just going to simply use our y equals key. That's what a graphing calculator is for, is to help us graph equations. Now, this is already solved. If this wasn't solved, that means if both x and y, or there's something in front of y, then we would use our rectangle triangle. But this is solved. So all you need to do now is type this into your y equals key. Now, hopefully, you're not going to make the same mistakes that maybe you made on day 1. Day 1, we spent a lot of time explaining that this is a negative sign in front of 7 over 3. And this is a minus sign because it's my second term. So my first term has a negative sign, my second term is a minus sign. Now, after you put in your y equals key, you're going to want to look at the table to fill this in. So you're going to hit second graph, and you're going to want to look at the graph. Now, also remember, this is the only time you can type x into your calculator is when you're in your y equals key. Okay, so looking at all my answer choices and then looking at your calculator screen, you should see your answer. So if you need a little bit more time to get to your calculator, then pause the video, because I'm going to tell you the answer in 2 seconds. All right. Looking at my table, I see 0, -7. This is going to be when x is 0, so this is my y-intercept. And this is my x-intercept when y is 0. And the only one that has that is b. And the way to double check that is also by looking at the graph, we can tell that is b. Okay? Moving on. Number 4. Number 4, they're asking us to show in slope-intercept form 3x plus 7y minus 19 equals 0. Now this can be kind of tricky. You have to think to the steps that I taught you on day 3 and on day 5. Whenever we're given an equation, first off, slope-intercept form means we're just solving for y, because it's y equals mx plus b. But whenever we're given an equation, we got to know what steps to go through. So we don't need to distribute here. We don't need to clear fractions. What we do need to do, though, is recognize that this -19 or minus 19 and 0 are considered like terms. Now, to move this -19 over to the other side of the equation, we need to do plus 19 to move it over to the other side of the equation. That is combining like terms. Okay, we're going to spend more time on this. There's only one question that comes up like this today. But this is also an important concept in itself. So just trust me in knowing that right now our equation is 3x plus 7y equals 19. And when you see this question on your own in independent practice, move over your like terms by doing its opposite to the other side of the equation and then add those together, because 0 plus 19 is 19. Now, here's where I need you to be really good today. If you have something like 3x plus 7y equals 19, the next thing you need to do is set up your rectangle triangle to solve for y. So the number in front of y is positive 7. That gives it the rectangle. Triangle is 3x. Most of the time your triangle is going to be your x term, unless x is not on the same side as y. Okay? Next, you always move your triangle by doing its opposite. So its opposite is minus 3x. Now, this side cancels. This side, we're going to remember that 19 minus 3x, that's not 16 or 16x. It's going to be side by side, 19 minus 3x. Then to get rid of this 7 that's in front of y, we almost always are dividing in this case. 99% of the time we divide to get rid of that number in front of y, and we're dividing here. So next we're going to type this in our calculator. 19 divided by 7, and you get a crazy decimal. Math enter, and you get 19 over 7 because this does not reduce. And the same thing with negative 3 over 7. So that's my equation. Now, if you look at these answer choices, the only answer choice that matches up to this would be which answer? And it would be D. Okay, number 5. Number 5, they're asking us to use 3 sets of values for x and y. They gave us an equation. They want us to plot these points and then draw an equation or a line of the equation. Okay, so they're kind of trying to throw us off in these directions. Even though they didn't say to do something, anytime we have an equation in the problem, that's what we need to focus on. And anytime this equation is not solved, we need to solve this equation for y. Every time, especially when they're asking us to draw an equation of the line. So the next thing we're going to do is use what we know to solve for y. What we know is to put 1s in front of y and x when it's not given. And then draw a rectangle around the negative 1 that's in front of y, triangle around the 1x, just like the previous problems. So next, we're going to get rid of the triangle by doing its opposite. Always add or subtract to get rid of the triangle. And in this case, this triangle has an imaginary plus in front of it, so we're going to subtract 1x on both sides. So that means right now, because we're not going to combine these together, they're not like terms, we have negative 1y equals 5 minus 1x. Next, to get rid of this negative 1 that's in front of y, we divide, because we always divide as our last step, and we divide by negative 1. Now 5 divided by negative 1 is going to become negative 5, and then negative 1 divided by negative 1 is 1, and we bring down the x. Now, since they're wanting us to draw the line and match table values, we need to put this into our y equals key. So go ahead and type this into your y equals key. After you type it into your y equals key, take a look. Which answer choice matches up with what you have? Now, here's something that is a little thing. If you don't want to use your y equals key and you want to know how to do this by hand, the number that doesn't have the x with it, that's where it hits the y-axis, so it has to start. So if you notice, only A and B start on the y-axis at negative 5, or hit at negative 5. Actually, D does too. So these 3 hit at negative 5 on the y-axis. Then if you look at the number in front of x, that's your slope. That's the number that it has to go up by. That's the reason why you hear teachers say rise over run. So then it would have to rise up 1 over 1, up 1 over 1 each time. So A almost does it, but it would have to hit this point right there. Then up 1 over 1, up 1 over 1. And B is going in the wrong direction. It actually has a negative slope. Now, if that didn't make any sense to you at all, don't worry about it because you have your y equals key. So as long as you type this into your y equals key, look at your graph, then you're done. So your answer is D. Okay, we're doing 2 more examples. Here's our next example. This one. This is an inequality. So inequalities have special rules. Our special rules with inequalities are right here. Now this is a lot of rules. We covered this on day 5, and we did one example on day 5, and we covered this on day 3. Now what's new is right here in the middle of the screen. So I need you to take notes on what does less than mean. Less than means we're going to shade below and have a dotted line. And to help you remember, there's no line underneath less than. That's the reason why it's dotted. If I put a line underneath it, that means it's less than or equal to, and then we would have a solid line. For greater than, it's dotted, this time shaded above. If it has a line underneath it, still shaded above, and it's a solid line. Okay, don't forget the reasons why we flip. We flip if we have a negative in a rectangle, or in this case, it's not going to be x that we're solving for. We're solving for y is on the right side. Okay, don't need to know any of these rules though until we solve for it. So if we go and look at this equation, negative y is less than or equal to 2x minus 7, we need to first solve for y because y is not by itself right now. There is a negative 1 in front of y. That makes a difference because we need to divide everything by negative 1. That's how you get rid of a rectangle, is divide. So if you take 2x divided by negative 1, you now have negative 2x. And then negative 7 divided by negative 1 is positive 7. Now, this, once you finish solving for y, and we're finished solving for y at this point because we got rid of our rectangle, then you read the reasons why you flip the symbol. And in this case, we're going to flip because we had a negative in our rectangle, which means we were dividing by a negative. So I'm going to take this less than or equal to symbol and flip it to a greater than or equal to symbol. All right, now let's finish the question because they want us to graph it. In order to graph this, you're just going to put your equation part into your y equals key. Negative 2x plus 7. Then you're going to graph it. Then you're going to remember these, what's in the middle of the screen, that greater than or equal to means this line right here should be shaded above and be a solid line. So if you look at your answer choices, we're looking for the one that's shaded above and a solid line. These are the steps we have to go through for inequalities. Okay, I'm going to show you one more inequality and then I'm showing you independent practice questions. Here is 3x minus 4y is greater than negative 12. First thing, if you notice, I don't have y by itself. So I'm going to set up my rectangle and my triangle. We're also going to remember these rules, but not until I solve first. So if I have a triangle as triangle as 3x, I need to do minus 3x on both sides. Now we're going to remember that 12 minus 3x, they're not like terms. So we're going to put them side by side. Then we're going to get rid of this negative 4 by dividing everything by negative 4. So negative 12 divided by negative 4 becomes positive 3. And then negative 3 divided by negative 4 is 0.75. Positive 0.75 and bring down the x. Now the reason why I decided to use a decimal here is because we didn't have a crazy decimal. If we had something that was repeating or something that didn't end after 2 decimal points or 3 decimal points, I would always want to make it a fraction. But you can use decimals if they're a simple decimal, and I would consider this a pretty simple decimal. Now, if you're used to using fractions, then use a fraction, no big deal. The big deal in this problem, though, is to figure out if we need to flip. There's 2 reasons why we flip at the bottom of the screen. We flip if there's a negative in the rectangle, or if y, because that's what we solved for, is on the right side. Now, y is on the left, so no reason there, but we did have a negative in the rectangle, so it flipped. Okay, next, you're going to type this into your y equals key. Then you're going to remember what less than means. Less than means after we look at the picture, we should be shaded below and have a dotted line. Now notice your calculator doesn't do dotted lines. Some of your teachers will have you change this line to be a dotted line, but then you're messed up for your next question. So it's just easier to remember that this should be a dotted line and shaded below. So looking at my answer choices, I then need to be shaded below in a dotted line. So my answer will be C. All right, next. Here's your independent practice questions. Now, because a lot of these are going to be graphs, I actually have 7 different slides I'm going to show you with independent practice questions. So I'm only going to pause on each slide for about 5 seconds, and I'm going to say pause, and then I'm going to say that I'm unpausing in 3 seconds. So you need to write these questions down or take notes while the video is paused so you can get these answers. So moving on to the next screen in 3 seconds. All right, here's 2 more. Moving to the next screen in 3 seconds. Here's the next 2, number 5 and number 6. Okay, here's number 7. Here's number 8. And here is number 9. We only have 9 questions today. And the reason why is because I couldn't fit some of these questions are just taking up the whole screen. That way you can get a good picture of the graph. All right, now next I'm going to go over the answers. So keep the video paused if you're working on them. Okay, number one, that's asking to put it in slope-intercept form. So the first thing I need to do is solve for y. If I solve for y, rectangle is the +6, the triangle is the negative or 7x. So I'm going to do -7x on both sides of the equation. I'm going to put these side by side because they're not like terms, and then I'm going to divide everything by 6. If I divide everything by 6, the -8 divided by 6 actually turns into -4/3 after I hit math and enter. It's because these both reduce by 2. But the -7/6 doesn't reduce, and that's it. And this matches with B because they keep the same coefficient in front of x, and they just swap the order and the same y-intercept. Now number 2 is asking us to put this in standard form. So right now there's only one equation that has both x and y on the left side, and it's equal to one number. It's okay that it's equal to a negative number. Now that alone tells me that A is my answer. But if you wanted me to prove that the A is my answer, I could solve it by moving over my 5x, by making it minus, and dividing by +9. So -3 divided by +9 becomes -1/3, and then -5 divided by 9 does not reduce. But this is the same answer that I started with, so I know A is my answer. Okay, here comes number 3. Number 3, in order to graph it, and this is what you have to know, is when we are not given an equation, we have to solve for y. That's the main purpose of today's lesson, is solving for y. So we're going to subtract -1 or 1x from both sides of the equation, and then we're going to divide by -6 because that's the number in front of y. Now because I'm dividing by -6, we got to know that we had to flip our symbol. So you need to either flip it now when you're dividing by -6 or at the very last step. Now -6 divided by -6 is +1, and -1x divided by -6 comes out to be +16x. So then you type this into your calculator. Oh, I guess I didn't do it. I thought I did it. All right, you type this into your calculator and know that greater than is shaded above and needs to be a dotted line. I thought I put this into my y equals key, but I didn't. So let me explain how you would do it if you didn't have your y equals key. The number without the x is your y-intercept, so it has to hit at 1. They all do. Next, the slope is positive, so since it's a fraction, that means it has to go up 1, starting at 1, and then over 6 until it hits another point, and then up 1 over 6. This does. these two, B and D, don't. They actually go down 1 over 6, down 1 over 6. So the only difference between A and B is A is shaded below and D is shaded above. Okay, again, if that didn't make sense how I was doing this without looking at a graph, then just use your y equals key and graph it. All right, number 4. Number 4, we have to move this minus 16 over to the other side first because it's considered a like term before I set up my rectangle and triangle. So the way that we need to move it over is doing plus 16 on both sides of the equation. Then we have 5x minus or plus 9y is equal to 16. I need to subtract 5x on both sides of the equation, divide by 9, and then we have our answer choice of A. All right, number 5. Number 5, we did more yesterday on day 5 than today. But number 5, we have a table. So we didn't have this in our notes for today, but whenever we have a table, we need to use our stat key. So if I were to type all of these into stat, my x's are my L1s, my y's are my L2s, and then I do stat calc 4 to get linear regression, and there's my answer right here on my calculator screen. So my answer is D. On number 6, slope-intercept form means we need to solve for y. So we set up our rectangle and triangle, subtract 5x on both sides. Know that you can't combine these because they're not like terms. Divide by negative 3. And by dividing by negative 3, my negative 5 divided by negative 3 turns this into positive, and it turns in my slope and my x term into positive as well. So my answer is C. Number 7, this can be tricky. First off, they're asking us to graph, so we can't graph until y is solved for. So the number in front of y is 8. That's my rectangle, and I don't have a triangle in this problem. So the way to solve for y is divide both sides by 8. Then, since y is on the right side, this would be my second reason why we flip. Since y is on the right, we want to flip it over to be on the left, but that flips my symbol as well. So now I have y is greater than or equal to 3/8. Now if I type that in my calculator and then graph it, know that greater than or equal to means I need a shade above with a solid line. And there's only one answer that has that. That is D. All right, number 8. Number 8, we have x plus y is equal to negative 2. Again, it just doesn't say in our directions, but we need to know that we need to solve for y because y is not by itself right now. Right now it has x plus y on that side. So the next thing we need to do is also know that there's 1s in front of both x and y, and then set up our rectangle triangle. A rectangle is going to be this positive 1 that's in front of y. Triangle is the 1x. So then move the triangle by doing minus 1x on both sides of the equation. Then we just have 1y is equal to this. Dividing by a positive 1 doesn't change anything, only if we divide it by a negative 1. So this is my equation. Put this into our y equals key, and then look at our graph. Now, something tricky. Both, maybe you can see it better than me, but both B and D look like they could be the answer. So what I need to do next is think about some points. If I look at B, I have a point. If I count over to where 2 is, count down to negative 4, and then count over where 1 is, count down to negative 4. These are the points that are on both graphs because they are both hitting at negative 2. Now, what you could do next is look at your table. Only one of these points will be on your table. Or you could plug 2 into our equation. Negative 2 times 1 times negative 2 is negative 4. But if I plug 1 in right here, I don't have negative 4. So, the way that, by using our table, I know that my answer is B. All right, number 9. Number 9, we need to solve for y again. So if I solve for y, my rectangle is negative 3 and my triangle is 2x. So I'm going to subtract 2x on both sides. Then I'm going to divide by negative 3. And because I'm dividing by -3, my symbol needs to flip because I have a negative in my rectangle. And then -6 divided by -3 becomes +2. And then I have +2/3 x. Put that in my y equals key, graph it, know that less than means shade below and have a dotted line, and there's only one that has that, and that would be A. Okay, so here's what's going to happen next. We're going to do one star question, and then that's it for this video for today. So here is our star question. As you can see, it's very similar to everything we've been doing today. So the only thing that's weird is we're given a pretty big number. I'll tell you about that number in a second. But let's start off exactly the same. We're going to set up our rectangle and our triangle solving for y. So our rectangle is going to be the +7. The triangle is going to be the -2x. Always move the triangle first by doing its opposite, plus or minus. And since it's -2x, we need to do +2x on both sides. All right, we're going to know that this is going to cancel, leaving me with just 7y on the left side. But on the right side, we need to know what 112 plus 2x is. Well, those are not like terms, so we're going to write them side by side. Then we're going to divide by 7. So both of these terms, everything divided by 7, and type in 112 divided by 7 into your calculator, and then 2 divided by 7 in your calculator. Now 112 comes out to be 16 divided by 7. 2 divided by 7 gives us a crazy decimal, so we're going to do math enter, and it comes back to +2/7. Now the next question we ask is, do we need to flip in this problem? Now this problem doesn't flip because there's only 2 reasons why it flips. A negative in my rectangle, doesn't matter that there's a negative in the triangle. And if y is on the right side, well, y is on the left side, so that's good. So the next thing we can do, we could put this into our y equals key. But if you put it in your y equals key, because we started with such a big number, and now that we have 16, you're actually not going to see the graph if you put it in your y equals key. So here, I'm going to show you. If you put it in your y equals key, nothing shows. So the only way I know what the answer is by knowing that this less than or equal to symbol means we need a shade below and have a solid line. So there's only 2 solid lines here, and this one's shaded above, this one's shaded below. Now another way I could tell the answer is 16 is my y-intercept, so it has to start at 16, like all of these do, by the way. And then I need to use my slope by going up 2, so going to 18 over 7. So that's the reason why you know it's between C or B, but we already knew that anyways based off our symbol. Another way we could tell what the answer is by looking at our table and verifying that C has the point 7, 18 on the graph. And we know that's it versus A and D. Okay, so that's the star question for today. Thank you for listening to the video. Be sure to tune in tomorrow for the next posting.